We hire for aptitude and attitude. Aptitude comprises of wisdom and intelligence. Wisdom being everything you bring to date. Your set of experiences, your judgment, how good are you at problem solving, how critical of a thinker are you. Learning or intelligence is purely your ability to learn, your ability to solve complex problems, how quickly you reason. And that's actually the easy of the two. When it comes to attitude, in my opinion, it's the make it or break it. And we have 6 of them that we came up with over time after realizing what are those attitudes that we value. So number 1 is grit and resilience, because if people are not sufficiently determined to succeed, they will fail.
Alrighty. I was only like 50% sure that would work off the break. Thanks everybody for joining, especially for Isaac and Ben. Excited to jump into it this afternoon. I do have some notes, normally because I forget, like afterwards I think of all these things I wish I would have said. One thing I wasn't planning on talking about was Lifetimely and how we came into Lifetimely. And then Nick grabbed me upstairs and was like, you have to talk about this. So I'll just talk about it really quickly. So my co-founder and I have actually been in SaaS for Shopify since 2013. He founded a company called TradeGecko, which did inventory and order management. And that company went away in around 2019 or 2020 because it unfortunately got acquired by a small company called Intuit and is now their QuickBooks Commerce product. And then we had to go into, sit on the bench for a couple of years during an earn-out, and then we came back and we were still super enthusiastic about e-commerce. Like when we started, Shopify was doing, say, 15 million in revenue or 30 million in revenue, and now it's doing 8 billion in revenue. So still very enthusiastic about developing from the merchants, but we're definitely feeling, when you sell your company, you don't have a team anymore, you don't have customers anymore, so we thought a great way, and then we met this amazing entrepreneur, Kari, through the founder of WooCommerce, and were able to form a partnership quickly, and we acquired Lifetimely 2 years ago now. I think people only heard about it for the first time a year ago, because we just decided to shut the fuck up, double the engineering team, and get back to work before talking about it. But that's the story of Lifetimely and AMP, and we want to do a few more products as well. So,
thank you.
No, thanks, Nick. I hope that's what we had in mind. So I think the 2 founders we have up here, or the 2 leaders we have up here, need no introduction, but I'll do one anyway. 2 people at the helms of amazing and very different businesses. What do they have in common? Super high quality products, whether it's clothing, candy, or katanas, and probably slightly different gross margin profiles, slightly different expectations around repurchase rates, slightly different CAC to AOV, very, very few variants, very, very, very many variants. So we're excited to get into it, and we've sourced a few questions from Maytab and a few other people in the industry. I think to start off though, LTV is an acronym that everybody uses a lot. Ben, what does it actually mean? Like, what does it mean to you? What does it mean in aggregate at True Classic?
Yeah, I actually would love a quick show of hand of how many of you feel like LTV is well defined within your company, where everybody knows what it means, everybody's using the same calculation. Just raise your hand if you feel like it's figured out. Yeah, it's interesting, right? So if you break it apart, lifetime and then value. Lifetime, you gotta define what it is. But is it 3 months? Is it 6 months? Is it 12? Is it 3 years? So you might have multiple lifetime values because you look at it through the lens of, let's say, 12 months, and then 24 months, and then 36 months. And then value is the one that I find most interesting in this industry, being very poorly defined. You even mentioned AOV, what is the average order value? Most people look at Shopify revenue and call it value. Value is a lot deeper than that, and you need to go, in our world, all the way deep to contribution profit. So our definition is the cumulative contribution profit per customer being their quote-unquote value, and then over whatever period of time. So that means you got to take into account discounts and returns and exchanges and payment processing fees and product costs and pick and pack and shipping logistics and you name it. So many different things into account to ultimately understand what is the value of the order whenever the order actually comes. And as you get more complex, those order economics actually starts to vary, right? An order dropping in Amazon looks very different than an order dropping at Shopify looks very different than an order dropping at Kohl's or Target. So as you go deeper and deeper into that concept, you start realizing that even in the metric definitions alone, there is a lot of value, no pun intended, so we're all speaking the same language, but cumulative contribution profit per customer is the North Star at True Classic.
I like that a lot. Cumulative contribution profit. Isaac, does anything jump out? Two very different businesses in terms of maybe one does not need that many katanas, one does need a lot of candy. What are you thinking there?
Ben, why do you think like there's no unified definition in the industry?
It's a great question. In my view, most platforms just don't really surface all the data we need. So think Shopify as an example. I think they're, no offense, we love Shopify, but do pretty poorly on the job of explaining to merchants like how their business actually operates. And that's why tools like Lifetimely are actually super valuable. Those insights are not available readily on Shopify. And so if you think about the profitability profile, Shopify doesn't really surface to you, for example, return rates, like what's the expected return rate and how does that vary based on type of customer, if it's their first order, second order, and on? How does that vary based on different product categories? And then what is the cost for you as the merchant to process that? And that might look different whether they came back and bought another product or just cleared it and returned and never came back. Like it just becomes super deep and complex for them to really surface that, in my opinion.
I also feel like it's really situational. Like, we have a sword business and we have a candy brand, right? And the sword business, for the most part, nobody really buys a sword twice. Like, it'll be very counterintuitive for us to be like, let's optimize LTV and try to make sure everyone's buying a sword twice. No, it's like, it's actually easier for us to get better at acquiring new customers, which is why we ended up focusing so much on viral distribution on social platforms, and now why we get billions of views a month, right? But like, for the candy brand, that's infinite LTV. The product is so good, if you let the customer taste it once, they're hooked. So our job is to really just get the customer to taste it once, and then LTV will kick over, and they'll buy it several times a year. And that's all retail first. So like, they'll pick it up at their Target. The average Target customer goes to Target 4 or 5 times a year, so they'll pick it up on their trip. So I think there's so situational, right? Different businesses have different physics depending on your product profile, and I think you have to be very cognizant of what you're dealing with. Like with shirts, of course people buy a lot of shirts. Like I have 40 of these. So like
they look great.
Yeah, I think it's Michael Kors, not True Classic. I'm making a switch soon. But like, of course, you can stockpile LTV on top of this over time, right? So I think it's just situational.
Yeah, I'll add even a deeper thought for a second. So what I just shared is looking at the customer as an individual, but now start thinking about, well, that customer brings potentially some other customers, or maybe they become advocates of the brand. How do you start capturing that type of value? And what is that word of mouth, kind of like flywheel effect, and who of those customers end up becoming, an advocate or an ambassador for your brand? So even in your example, maybe they don't bring more orders themselves, but perhaps they influence other orders, and therefore they provide more value to your brand. So you can kind of really go deeper and deeper into that concept and thinking about like truly how valuable is that customer for me.
How do you optimize referrals?
We do a referral program, and we look at basically how many successful referrals people ultimately provide. And we sometimes even look at things like, are they posting online, and do they help us generate user-generated content? Like that's value. If they become insiders and they provide product feedback. Insiders for us is the membership program. Shout out to Inveterate, amazing program for us. And we engage with them on a really deep level. And we have an amazing community of insiders, and we ask them lots of questions, and they give us lots of insight. That's value, right? Because now they help me with my product roadmap. I have customers who show up to our all hands, because every all hands at True Classic, there has to be at least one customer to come and talk to us. That's value. That helps the company and the team really understand who that customer is, how they feel, how do we make them feel, etc. So I just view this from different lenses, but I think we all can intuitively say that the value of a customer is greater than lifetime revenue on Shopify.
Yeah, totally. I think there's so many interesting things there. To jump back to the start, you sort of threw to the room as like, hey, how many people have this one definition that everybody uniquely understands and is perfect? And it's very difficult. That almost makes me think to something we were talking about earlier, which is like grading talent and the hiring process, and how like we drive our businesses forward internally through either whether it's tracking metrics or whether it's repeating our company values or top priorities at the all hands every time, even though it can be perceived as relative. When it comes to grading talent and the hiring process, what are some actionable things that you all do that might be unique, that might be interesting for the brands we have with us today?
I always ask, how do you make a campfire? Because nobody knows how to make a campfire. So you can see, I like testing how quick people are on their feet, because we have such a fast-paced environment with the way we operate, that if somebody's quick on their feet and can critically think, they'll probably thrive in any role. And it also lets them grow within our organizations, right? So I really prioritize the cultural and the kind of the fit of whether they're like, they can just think.
Can you hack it in this environment?
Can you survive in a startup environment where it's like too fast all the time?
Yeah. Nice, I like that.
Yeah, first of all, I would say this is by far the hardest part of business. And anybody who tells you otherwise lies to you. So if you struggle with hiring, if you struggle with people, it's natural. And it happens to all of us, and it's just part of the business. We hire for aptitude and attitude. Aptitude comprises of wisdom and intelligence. Wisdom being everything you bring to date. Your set of experiences, your judgment, how good are you at problem solving, how critical of a thinker are you. Learning or intelligence is purely your ability to learn, your ability to solve complex problems, how quickly you reason. And that's actually the easy of the two. When it comes to attitude, in my opinion, it's the make it or break it. And we have 6 of them that we came up with over time after realizing what are those attitudes that we value. So number 1 is grit and resilience. Because if people are not sufficiently determined to succeed, they will fail. This is a hard game. I always tell my team that we're all athletes in the game of business, and the weights don't get lighter. You get stronger, you get better. And it takes a lot of determination to persevere and to push through. And so examples of that would be like questions like, tell me about a time where you dealt with something really hard, perhaps your lowest low. And what pushed you through, and how did you kind of like persevere and overcome that? And you start realizing if people dealt with hardship before, because that's what builds character. And if you're trying to do anything great, it's going to be hard. And I'm looking for those types of attributes in hiring. And I have others similar, like around creativity, innovation, like growth mindset, trying to be 1% better every day, all sorts of kind of like small things. What I've found is that the aptitude components are almost like table stakes, right? You need to have someone with a relevant experience who's intelligent and smart and being able to reason and solve problems. But the attitude ones is the make or break it at the end of the day for finding the right people to be in the right seats.
I feel like where I make the most mistakes are actually like not firing fast enough. Or like, I'm actually like hiring is like, I feel like we've gotten really good at, but like we always don't fire bad people fast enough.
Yeah. We think about, so we're venture backed this time around. We've had one bootstrapped, one venture backed before, and I was sitting down with who turned out to be our lead investor when we were just starting the business, and he said, Patrick, why don't you get a piece of paper and write down all the mistakes you made last time and just don't do any of that. And he went on to lead our fundraising round, and I went on to make all the same mistakes. I like to think I realize much faster, like a untenable people situation that I might have let go for 11 months might now go for like 11 days or 30 days or something like that.
Yeah, everyone who's like resigned or been fired, like the next one we hired was a way bigger upgrade.
Yeah.
So like, I think like my advice to my past staff would be like, hey, you can fire, it's okay, just fire them.
Yeah. So it can be better for them as well.
COVID hit and everybody was like, let's go extremely remote. Let's hire from all over the place. Are there any roles where you're like, I don't care for that to be in-house, and I would like this role to be an outside vendor, maybe a contractor? Is there things you're like, that will always be out of house versus I want this in-house?
So I'll tell you my philosophy there. There is this invisible bar that keeps rising within the company. And that's the bar below which we can actually outsource effectively. And let's call it like the strategic bar. So any role when you don't have any, let's just say, decision frameworks or SOPs or any way of how we do things, how we move, you need that strategic thinking. And that's likely going to need to happen kind of like internally. But as things progress and things become more basically well-defined, well-structured, the systems are in place, the house is in order, the SOPs are established, it becomes more and more and more outsourced, and at least a true classic. And so for you to be on the US team, quote unquote, or the corporate team, you have to keep actually up leveling and working on the business, not in the business, because that bar keeps rising. And you need to actually be that person who keeps raising the bar. And so I think of it as like an evolution, and it just depends on how developed the business is. Most outsourced resources, you don't expect them to do the deep thinking. Yeah. You don't expect them to define the direction.
You shouldn't.
Right, 100%. And so it's just depends on like how developed your business is in a given area of whether or not it makes sense for that point in time to bring it in-house versus outsourced.
I think there's growth roles and there's like maintenance roles. And the growth roles we keep in the US, preferably near me where I can go annoy them. And the maintenance roles are all offshore. So like, think of like a bookkeeper, somebody who's maintaining a system, right? Like you said, where there's a clearly defined SOP. Out of curiosity, how many people here outsource?
Can we ask that question more specifically, like outsource?
Outsourced outside the US.
Okay. Outsource creative. Outsource finances. Outsource, what else would you fucking outsource? Media buying, the actual growth.
It saves so much money. Do it.
Well, you're very focused on making sure that the one core piece that you guys create a lot of, which is your content. It'd be very difficult to do a lot of outsourcing. I even think on the Ben side, you guys probably have a bunch of creators that are more or less outsourced with some kind of like very specific eye to what you guys want to be created. I'd love to hear your different ideology on like the creative workflow in versus out.
When it comes to creators, like really good, like creative content, I tend to like find a single team member and I always hire around those people, right? Like you find one great person who's like great with short form video, then you can hire another creator to learn from them, then you can hire an editor, and then you can hire script writers, and you can hire more team members who keep learning from that team now, right? So we actually have a studio in Alabama and we have a studio in Spain because that's just where I happen to find the best talent for the initial hire. And I think that's how I like to go about it, and I think the results speak for themselves because really like you're building, the attention will come from very creative, talented people, and you want to enable those people.
Pat, this goes back to your high leverage decision making, right? You want to keep that one thing the closest to yourself. What's your thoughts on that?
What was that, sorry?
On the high level decision making, like where you should keep this leverage point.
Yeah, well, I think to step back, I think for us, when hiring even internal or external, we like everyone to be in like the same 4-hour spread. Like not everybody needs to have 8 hours of overlay. We like to have at least 4 hours of overlay. As far as I think whether it's internal or external, for us, if there's any question, it's internal. And just everything else can be figured out afterwards. That would be like our default decision. The trade-offs are sometimes it takes a little longer. You could chance into something working externally, I guess. And so we touched on target there. You went from starting a new brand to in target in 8 months. Ben, you are now looking at other retail options for True Classic as well. Explain the journey in 8 months from starting a brand to getting into Target. Like, what was that like? How, I'm sure, tell us about it.
Well, I want to preface by saying, when I had the sword business, like, we had such a great marketing playbook where we, for context to everyone, maybe some of you don't know, we get like 1 billion views a month on YouTube, and that's our main acquisition channel. That's the entire brand's marketing at this point. We started on TikTok, but we pivoted earlier. But I picked just such a bad product, like swords. Like nobody buys swords. So the business's total addressable market was like just capped. And it became this massive frustration where it's like, oh, views kept increasing, but like, we just weren't being rewarded for it. I couldn't promote the team too much. I couldn't reward our own team members for the great culture we created together. And I talked to a lot of people, and smarter people than me, Sean, Frank, Ben, a lot of folks, and really the problem I came back to was product, right? Product is the hack. That's the ultimate hack. And Kanpai, I spent about a year making the first like 4 or 5 SKUs, and then launched it in January. And all that success comes from like a year of just really focusing in a commercial kitchen on the best possible products to launch, right? And before we launched, I actually like wrote my dream retailer is Target. That's where I go to. And strategically speaking, we got smaller accounts like World Market that we knew would like be proof to Target that we could sell through well in their stores. But it's been the product. Like the velocity is so high. Retailers have to keep reordering. People are addicted to it once they taste it.
Amazing. And Ben, as it's come, like the business has already gotten into so much revenue prior to doing retail, how do you see that shaping up as a mix or as a channel for y'all?
Yeah, another quick question for the crowd. How many of you buy your clothes primarily in physical retail locations? Okay, and that's a very digital first crowd to begin with, but it's about 70%.
Yeah.
And so we spend a lot of money on all our big tech platforms, right? Our favorites, Google and Facebook and TikTok and all of that, and we were nowhere to be found in any physical form. And so there is this like interesting concept, right, of what I call like the invisible assets on your balance sheet, right? You spend all this money, you collect all those emails, you reach so many people. It's there. It's this like potential for monetization that until people might actually rub into you in the real world, they might not actually pull the trigger. Because I can tell them all day long we make the best jackets or the best t-shirts or the best jeans, but they need to go and try it. They're that sensory shopper. So we were just on a path right now to basically be available or make ourselves available whenever and wherever the consumer might want to shop. And so we launched with Kohl's nationwide. It was a great success. We launched with Sam's Club. We're in active conversations with all the largest retailers. And that's just a big part of how we envision the brand kind of like playing forward, not to neglect the direct-to-consumer side at all. We also have our own retail locations. We have 9 specifically stores around the US, more to come. We are in marketplaces, so Amazon is a big one for us. And we just want to make ourselves available. That's kind of like the short of the strategy. Still direct-to-consumer is the bread and butter. But people want to shop in all sorts of ways. And the vision is to become global omnichannel brand. But that's why I'm going back to the importance of lifetime value. And there's just so much complexity when you start thinking about this omnichannel approach and how do you make sense of it, commercially speaking, for the greater good of the business.
Totally. I think, yeah, it'll be interesting to see, say, 1 year or 2 years from now, how many customers you have shopping from you online, but who started out in retail because they tried on a specific product, it fit, they wore it, they bought it again, and now they're buying bundles online.
And we already see that for our own retail locations. We use the Shopify point of sale, so you can already see that omnichannel behavior. And we definitely have people who shopped True Classic first time offline, and then they come online, or they visited offline or physical, and they wanted something in another color or whatnot, but that was kind of like what they needed to see in order to place the order online. So we already see some of that, not through the other retailers, but through our own retail location.
Out of curiosity, did you always have this like very defined vision of what LTV was?
Just the main part of to me, the North Star has always been generating.
Like when you were scaling the brand, like 7 figures, 8 figures, did you have that clear definition?
Contribution profit, yeah. Okay. The North Star has always been, we are here to generate marginal incremental contribution profit. That's literally what we're intending to do. So if you think about the 3 company objectives for us, is acquire as many customers as possible, maximize their lifetime value, i.e. cumulative contribution profit per customer, and operate efficiently and effectively. That's literally their North Star. That hasn't changed. And now we're thinking through that lens of like, okay, like what does it look like? But the deeper convos that we just discussed, like those are not even being reflected effectively. I don't have like a already built in, like, I don't know, CDP where you factor in all this extra, if you will, add-on value from customers. But I think those are actually really important because frankly, we all know what it feels like when you bring in an ambassador. Those are insanely valuable, right? People call them the whales and whatnot. And if you think about it from an acquisition standpoint, like how do you get more of them? You know that they're super valuable. I don't think that most brands, inclusive of us, are doing a phenomenal job really finding them effectively and scaling that segment, even though it's a super important one. So that's where I think the focus could actually yield better results. And then you can also spend more money because you can afford it if you have a just more valuable asset in a customer.
And so with that in mind, let's talk about when is the right time to add new products. Like, so let's say you started with you added bigger swords, sharper swords. You've gone from t-shirts to everything, as far as I could tell, on the menu. I'm often on the Australia side, but I think even Australia has everything now. At what point, what does that lineation look like, and what are their expectations? Is the expectation like, yep, they will all be equally successful, or do we expect something to be like 80% of the new product line revenue? What's the thought process? When to add, and what does success look like?
All right, I'll go again. I view every product as a line of business. And so I look at it through the lens of like, if we started with t-shirts, I think that for a good amount of time, we would still be known as a t-shirt brand because we did so much marketing as True Classic Tees before we even dropped the Tees and became True Classic. And that carries forward. I still, actually, again, another show of hand, how many of you who did know about True Classic knew that we sold other things aside from t-shirts? Okay, some hands. It's something we're still working on. There's definitely an awareness gap, but I view that as like if you think about in the US, the denim market is like 5 times as large as the t-shirt market. Massive opportunity. We have phenomenal denim, like really, really good, comfortable, stretchy, fits really well, offered a good price point. I don't almost view that in the lens of like, is it t-shirt or denim? I view that as like, how do I maximize my opportunity as a t-shirt line? And then how do I maximize the opportunity as a denim line? And then from a lifetime standpoint, you start realizing, well, look, the people who shop multiple category are definitely way more valuable than the single category ones because they come back at different points in time. And if you get someone hooked on underwear or socks, those might be replenished on a faster cycle than maybe denim, right? And so every one of those start kind of playing a different role. I would say though, 100% same story here. Product is super fucking important. And don't like shortchange that for the life of marketing is gonna make it all work. Marketing is the fuel on the fire, right? To make the fire bigger, but like you are not gonna get that spark and you're not gonna get success if you don't have the raw materials, right? And that's to me the product. So yes, you can blow that campfire way bigger, but the product success is super important, or else you just have a marketing funnel that eventually will not yield particularly great results. So I would say move on that path as soon as you feel like you have enough bandwidth to generate additional successful good products, but don't kind of like fall into the shiny syndrome object, shiny object syndrome, and just do a bunch of products kind of well, but really not particularly well, and then it just becomes complete loss of focus and frankly detrimental to your business success.
Were you going to say something there, Isaac?
It's just when I started 3-4 years ago,
Yeah.
I got on Twitter, and all anybody would talk about is like meta,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, I just want to make cool swords.
Yeah.
I want to make the coolest possible thing, and I want to keep making the coolest possible thing over and over
Yeah.
again. And now that things are like getting really hard on meta, and the easy acquisition has dried up, everyone's shifting the conversation back to the fundamentals, which is like making really cool stuff that people want to talk about, people want to buy and want to be passionate about. And I think people that started there were way ahead of the game, really.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And so let's keep pulling on that. How do you figure, let's say there's a product that everyone thinks is fucking awesome, whether it's swords or candy or clothing. How do you figure out how much to make? Like I suppose what would be most interesting is how is your inventory forecasting process evolved over the last 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, for us, like, it's impossible.
Yeah, impossible, right? Like you just...
What we do is we look at like social sentiment. So we're very blessed with a big audience.
Yeah.
So we run polls, we look at comments, we actually make everything based off of comments.
Amazing.
Candy was actually a poll that Mini Katana ran 2 years ago about what else people would consider buying, and candy was like the top one. It was actually higher than apparel. But we tap into the audience. That's always been our model. With forecasting, we are very conservative and we aim at targeted sellouts. So everything becomes like a limited edition product.
Yeah.
And when things don't sell out, we have little, I call them value add hacks to get rid of them. Like, practically speaking, we have a subscription box that's like heavily discounted. It's like a sword a month and it works really well. We give a lot of gifts during the holiday season, which people love.
Yeah, that's cool.
It like makes them spend so much more money, and you can dump, inventory that wouldn't have otherwise sold. There's a lot of like little tools and hacks you can actually do to optimize the unselling, unmovable units in your warehouse.
That's cool. That's awesome. Ben, I think clothing would be very different. The variance is a wrinkle. How's that going for you all? And it sounds like it's every ordering period, you almost like iterate your way there, or I don't know, what's the current state at True Classic?
So if I said that hiring or people is the number one challenge, inventory management is number two. And I think it's pretty common challenge by so many companies, right? We all wish we had a crystal ball, but it turns out to be a lot more complicated than we all thought. And so again, be kind to yourself. We look at it as like a risk mitigation exercise of trying to balance the two types of risks of being overstuck and understuck. And they both carry different levels of financial risk. What we value, or what we benefit from, is that our inventory is pretty evergreen. It won't go bad. It doesn't go out of style. It's not seasonal. It just might sell slower or faster than we hoped. So we're trying to kind of get to that 18 weeks of supply. It has, by the way, don't just take my numbers and run with them. Think about it through your own lenses of like, what's your lead time? How quickly can you replenish? How much inventory should you have on hand? Inventory is the fastest way to kill your company if you don't have a healthy cash conversion cycle and good methods to liquidate. So be really careful about this whole thing. But in our world, 18 weeks. And the challenge is, and I mentioned earlier about our expansion, is now we look at it through the lens of like every SKU, which is a style, color, size combination. So there's thousands of them, by week, by sales channel, by location. It's a lot of combinations.
Yeah.
And all the variables that go into it. Well, does my marketing team have a media plan of how no, they don't.
Yeah.
Do we know what's gonna happen? No, we don't. So it's just a lot of guessing. But one thing we're trying to do, which helps us, is just reading the business more frequently. We're trying to get down to like a weekly read and react. And that helps us, if we have enough of a buffer, to just react in a little bit more of in time, if you will, to the changes in demand, and we either slow it down or bring it back up. And then in terms of tools, I completely agree, and I think you have more control over balancing inventory than people realize. So we do gift with purchase and the cart. We have a post-purchase unit with after sale, amazing partner of ours, where we can decide to offer specific discounts that are deeper than normal on specific products, kind of like more dynamically. So we might prioritize or deprioritize products based on our stock availability. So you can just influence it, right, through different areas, placements on your site, upsells, cross-sells in general, to try and like course correct if it starts getting out of whack. And I would say that the risk of being overstocked is fucking big. If you're sold out, it's painful as can be, but it's a better problem to have.
I have to reiterate that,
not knowing what to do with your inventory. So just remember that. I
feel like people get FOMO. They get FOMO. It's like Q4. What if I miss out? No. Sitting on too much cash, cash invested in inventory can kill you if you're bootstrapped.
Too much cash over too much inventory is the
too much inventory specifically.
Yeah. Totally. I don't have the energy to go back into inventory SaaS. I think that we had enough.
I would always rather grow slower and be sold out. Always. Like that's the best place to be. It can't kill you.
I love that. And we have just a minute left. So with that in mind, just in case you have another great hot take like that, when you see brands try and do creative or content, you've got 1 billion views a month, like what's a really cringe mistake, if anything, you see brands making when trying to enter that channel?
I think it's like, I kind of told everyone what I do, which is like focus on the individuals.
Yeah.
Like brands generally don't give a lot of creative freedom, which I think is like the easiest mistake to make, because you're like, oh, I'm used to controlling how ad sets will perform. No, like if you're hiring a young person who knows, an algorithm really well, you should trust them a little more.
Yeah. Cool. I like it. Awesome. Thank you both very much. Really appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Is there any questions? Any questions for the audience that we want to while they're
questions. Great. I didn't know we were doing that. Awesome.
No, I'm saying we're just going to do it. When you get two people up on stage that actually have like a lot of the depth, we got to keep them up here for as long as we can.
Isaac, you answered part of my question. It sounds like surveys was how you decided to go into candy as the second category, right? What gave you the confidence then, looking at that data, to say, yeah, that's the right move, considering it's a very different category than what you started in, completely different unit economics? I think that's a tough question to answer for a lot of brands is when and how do I make that move to a secondary category? What made you decide, yeah, we're all in and we're going for candy?
It's a complicated answer, but I think it's easy for me to answer because I was actually very intentional about the category and the product this time, as opposed to starting a letter opener company, pivoting to large swords and becoming an arms dealer. No, like I picked candy, like I knew what I was doing. The first thing is you have to look at the actual category we're in, and we're selling freeze-dried candy, which if you really pay attention to trends, that's a whole new category within confectionery. So the opportunity is like a blue ocean, right? And it's very easy. It's way easier to be in a blue ocean than a red ocean. So I wanted to avoid that. That was the first thing. And the number two was, hey, I'm really good at this one kind of marketing playbook, and I want to double down on that because our society rewards you doubling down on things and becoming the best at them. So is this going to work super well for this playbook? And with candy, the answer is yes. There's a reason why every YouTuber has a candy brand. It's because the audience aligns really well with the product. And the third thing I looked at was like, can I build a moat here? And again, the answer was yes, because there weren't a lot of co-manufacturers and we had to make manufacturing happen in-house. So we had to learn how to do that. So it was very like, there was a process behind it. I think the biggest factor though was that it was such a blue ocean.
All right. I try to formulate my question as fast as possible, but it's for Ben. For the longest, or right now, you guys currently sell a lot of different types of clothes, but for the longest time, you obviously just stuck to selling t-shirts. And so the question that I would like to pose is, how did you guys manage to position just t-shirts in a way where, even though you were growing so fast year over year, that you stayed so efficient? And kind of what levers did you try to pull, whether it was through specific offers, bundling, and so on and so forth?
All right, so I think to start is you have to find a real problem that you're trying to solve versus just having a product. It's like one thing if you have a t-shirt, and I don't think it's, frankly, like if you were to ask me, and I'm thinking back on like 2019 when the company started, hey, let's create a t-shirt brand. It just doesn't sound particularly appealing, right? It's like, what are you gonna renew or do particularly well in that category? But we had a real problem that we were trying to solve. And the whole idea of the company was how do we empower people to look good and feel good? And specifically for guys, finding a t-shirt that feels really great, soft to the touch, great fabric, fits really well. Fit was a huge and still is a huge problem in the marketplace. People don't find clothes that fit them well that easily. And we made this whole kind of fit around, like tighter around the chest and arm, looser around the torso, which really resonated with a lot of folks. We also went all size run up to 3XL. You go speak to like guys who have larger body types and you will see that it's even a bigger problem for them because nobody really thinks about how to make clothes that fit them particularly well and make them look good and feel good. So we had like just a whole thing of like, hey, we actually think we can make a whole lot better t-shirt and offer it for a ridiculously better price point.
Ben, how long did it take you to make the perfect shirt?
A lot, and I'm not the founder, right? There's three main founders. I run the company, but the original like prototyping and whatnot was, I want to say maybe close to like a year, and even within that, like we're on year 5, and it's still like reiterating on the fit and the fabric and the quality and the colors, and like it's a never-ending project, right? I don't think you're ever happy with your product. I think you always see the flaws in it. But actually, I think it gives you a lot of power when you go super narrow to start, because you're not trying to be the everything for everybody. You're just trying to be the best t-shirt in the world. And then when you offer a great product for a great price point, because let's just say the nice t-shirts out there are all way more expensive than True Classic, like way more expensive. And we offer it even better when you bundle, to your point about the offer, like you just win, because most consumers are just value shoppers at the end of the day. So you give them a great product, great fit, great feel, good price point. And then you go all in, right, with content. And our content, I think that's back to your question earlier, it's like, it's really intentional, it's really different. You won't find other clothing brand doing exactly what True Classic does, not easily at least. Maybe nowadays they all copy and try their different versions, but it really left an impression on the people to want to be curious and try the brand. And so storytelling was a huge, actually, differentiating factor for us early days. And once you start getting enough traction, you can start thinking, what else? How can you empower people to look good, feel good with beyond the t-shirt? But the initial period was very laser focused on that particular SKU.
That was an incredible answer, dude. Thank you. That was way more than you were expecting. Guys, round of applause. Thank you three. Thank you. We'll keep this good times going. You guys are off the stage. You guys are booted.